Hello, Gravitrons. I'm more gravity. Let's play chess. Let's start with game in 10 minutes per game per side. Slower than our usual time control. Ahoo. There are two versions of the year that preceded the signing of the Declaration of Independence by 100 years. Now we're going to find out about that. I really think it's time, don't you? Okay. Oh, alright. I can't practice. I can't practice this first computer because it's checkmate already. So yeah, played a good game, no doubt, man. Played a nice and strong game. Get this review going. I'll explain what there is to explain. Uh, what made it nice, what made it strong. I'm waiting, so I'll use my vape. Yeah, I mean, strong accuracy. It was a short game in the way of things. Not short as in bad, just wasn't all that lengthy compared to most other games. Checkmate on move 16. And let's move, see if we can find any talking points. The Petrov defense. I should really call it the Russian defense. I call the national defenses by their national name. So this is, I'm going to try to start calling this the Russian defense. This is the Russian defense. As I play it quite often. If you play it, you need to be able to handle the four knights. I mean, there are ways around the four knights, but they're not worth it. If white plays knight c3, the prescription is usually knight c6, and then you're in on a good game of the four knights. A wonderful and beautiful opening that people come at naturally. Because you know, we're playing. Dad said to play my central pawn forward, and then develop knights towards the middle. Right, this opening you can pretty much come across on your own as a beginner or even intermediate. My opponent played the standard Russian, which is to capture on e5. That's even more standard than going into the three knights or even the following four knights. Capture on e5. Black has to be patient in his response, his or their response. This part you might be, not often would I advise memorizing your openings. This part though is probably worth it, so you don't play certain parts of it out of order. The way to think of it is on move 3, you play D, which means the only pawn that can move to D is the D pawn. I guess you could. There are other pieces that can move to the D file, but the idea is you got to kick this knight back before moving on. Rephrase that section a bit. And then knight takes e5. So then black equalizes material. This this is almost a provocation by white. Bishop to d3. I chose to hold on to my central knight. I see white's having to take time in order to kick this knight as an advantage for black. So I'm holding on to my e4 knight. What's Torch have for us against bishop g4? Just this rook fe1. I think this is how the game went. Rook e1, e5. Still how the game went. Now Torch wants h3. That's how we played move 8. And then on bishop h5, we're still within engine here. And knight to c3. Found bishop c5. We are definitely in engine here for a little while. Knight takes e4. Was that not part of engine? White breaks us out of best move with knight takes e4. It wasn't necessary, right? The response, f takes e4, finds white in a fork. The bishop on d3 is forked with the knight on f3. And yes, that pawn is pinned, but black can scurry out of that right away. All right, so we get the piece back, and hey, this is living, man. White has to figure out how to keep his pieces on the chessboard. Bishop e2 is almost about as good a try as any. Bishop b5. I'm not worried about bishop b5 because if pawn c6 keeps the initiative for black, the bishop will have to move so as to escape the pawn chain either to a4 or e2. And I think black's still doing quite well there. So my opponent, instead of bishop b5 check, played immediately bishop e2. And I just castle. Yes, I know the knight can escape this otherwise winning attack, but there are so many pieces around black's there are so many pieces around white's kingside. Not even around white's kingside, but at a distance, still laying down fire against white's troops in front of his king. These pieces, maybe not the knight on b8 or the rook on a8, but look at this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Get your woman on the floor. That kind of thing. And that there's even, I would count the e4 pawn and maybe not the d5 pawn, except that it's supporting the e4 pawn. These pieces are all active against black's king, against black's king, against black's king, against black's king, and against black's king. You can see even a bishop change square color involved. That's how much they are against white's king. See, I did the same thing. I am half Catholic. Pawn to d4 as an attempt to break out of losing material. Capture the material first, calculating accurately that when the way the timing works out, white won't have enough time to capture that bishop, and so enough initiative, I should say. White won't have enough initiative to capture this dark squared bishop. And now I'm looking here and I'm saying, what's the thing to do? What's the thing to do? And it's actually here. What's the thing to do? What's the thing to do? And it's that sometimes they call it for sale. White's king is for sale. In other words, white doesn't have much king safety right now, so let's act against that. I want to mention something, by the way. I'll clear this board. Here with black to move. These two moves are probably pretty close to each other by evaluation. Okay, maybe not. But I chose the better move, and I chose the better move because f takes e4 prevents against an eventual bishop c4 check. Right? Instead of vacating the square to capture on e4, I leave in place the d5 pawn in case that should happen. I know I'm going to castle kingside, and then my king's going to be exposed to perhaps on the g8 to a2 diagonal. So keep this pawn intact and where it is, rather than the other way around. There's a little bit of nuance that probably helped me greatly. So d2, d4 is a good try. Look, very often when there's the en passant capture available, it is very often the way to go, the thing to do. I find this true in games, in puzzles. Pretty much that's it. But if you can capture en passant, consider it. It's usually the way to go. I don't know how else to say it. It's just kind of a weird thing that happens out of en passant moves. This case was not like that. If I move away and capture this pawn en passant, then so what? White can recapture with a pawn, a bishop, or a queen, and none of them really rock the house all that much. I decided instead keep the pawn where it is and start a race, a pawn capture race. So e4 takes f3, and like I said, it depends on what line white chooses. White could choose pawn takes c5, in which case I'm capturing on e2 for double shore, and other captures to follow. But instead, my opponent chose I think, it's slightly better move. So bishop takes f3, bishop takes f3. Yeah, this is how the computer has it too. Bishop takes f3, bishop takes f3, and forcing the doubling of pawns on the f file and stripping white from one of his most important defenders. At that, but also saving the bishop. White's ahead 2 pawns in material, and a good deal of other considerations. Black's ahead 2 pawns in material, and a good deal of other considerations like these double pawns and white's king safety being moderately to severely impaired. And a couple moves, and that's it. Black can get aggressive and force checkmate. It didn't have to be quite that early. The move rook to g1, prevented g1 from being white's escape square. So, no matter how you look at it, black is doing very, very well. That's it. That was that game. I think I'm going to include this in some of my collections of games. I reviewed it here on Twitch. High accuracy. One of my great games. All collected. Oh, that's special. And then more gravity. Any game that I think I felt, it doesn't matter. It's one of the categories I have. $21. Give me some time to catch up here, and probably play another game. I'm thinking about the time control. Play Game in 10 again? All right. Amazing popsicles. They're called uh, Gelatelli Space Runners, and it's part of the Lidl brand. And they're all these popsicles are amazing. Like the first two bites, especially. They're cold, and they taste good. They got 45. This whole popsicle, 45 calories. They're amazing. I love them. You can buy them at Lidl brand grocery stores. I think I'm saying the name of the store correctly. Okay. Oh. Okay, I'm going to review this game, and that's going to be the end of this broadcast. Once I'm finished reviewing this game. Sicilian defense. The C3 Sicilian, also known as the Alpine Sicilian. This one I might call the Alpine Sicilian. The C3 is a little bit more obvious or descriptive. Anyway, the Alpine Sicilian. White's goal is simple and direct and follows from the second move, which is pawn to c3. And white wants to obtain a central pawn duo against black, even as black has just played the Sicilian with the move pawn to c5. White is aiming for a classic central pawn duo. And so there are ways to entertain that or go against that. A good way to go against that is the move that my opponent chose, pawn to d5. So breaking up any kind of classic, even before we get to pawn duo, this already breaks up anything that you might associate with classic. All right, we have pawns staring at each other in the middle of the board as early as move 2. There's asymmetry, there's dynamic potential, there's build-up potential. This game is going to be fun. Let's take a look at how this one in particular evidenced that. So capturing on d5, queen takes d5, knight to f3, all book. I like the move bishop to g4 here, very strong. The pin on the f3 knight, we only look at the fact that he's pinned. We also look at the fact of how is that pin? Is that a really tough pin for white to negotiate? No. Is it a really easy pin for white to negotiate? No. It's in between. So it's like this is a moderately good pin for black. The most direct way to deal with it, I might have played bishop e2. I thought maybe there was some dynamic potential on the queen side, so instead I played bishop b5 check. Sometimes you play a move because you just like it. Pawn to c4. I just like that it's gaining a tempo on the queen. This is not a move that you would likely consider in advance as black, like as part of a calculation, because it's not a big deal, but I think it slightly improves the position for white. Forcing the queen to move off of, well, not necessarily, but there's a good chance that the queen might move off of the h1 to a1 diagonal. The queen comes to e4, check, which I would too, frankly. That's not bad. Calm the position down before there's any action here. Keep the tension against the f3 knight. I think queen to e4 check was a fine move. And then trading on the e-file, I thought also that was a fine move for both of us, really. Well, I didn't have a choice at that point, but this is a good move. I like to pick out in some of my games a move that shows that I'm really maturing as a chess player. Bishop takes c6. There's many moves open here or there and back again for white. Why, out of all these moves, should white play bishop takes c6? And the answer is simple. It's for destroying black's kingside pawn structure. It sounds, there's a lot of syllables involved, but when you look at it, it just means this. That black has gaps near his king. His king is now less safe. And even if it's not for that, his pawns are at a greater risk to being zapped by especially file-dwelling pieces like rooks and queens. There's more pawn islands. You don't have to worry too much about that, but just look at the black's pawn structure is busted pretty bad. Now knight to c3. The knight has to develop at some point. I'm not going to stick the rest of my game without my b1 knight and my a1 rook. So the knight's he's got to show up. So knight to c3 is a fine move. e5 is really great here by my opponent. Get at it. If there's some sort of impending buildup, get at your opponent before he has time. So, and just pawn to e5, making way for the dark squared bishop. There's nothing wrong with that either. h3. Wanted to put the question to this bishop before there could be complications with a pawn storm and possibly a pawn attacking my knight while it was still pinned. So I played h3 in a timely way rather than when it was too late. I'm fine capturing with the king here. Look, black has no light squared bishop. Black has no queen. The light squared diagonals aren't such a big deal for king safety for white. I'm gonna, I think I'm gonna still be careful, but it's better than losing because of your pawns being doubled on the F file here. These pawns are doubled too, so I decided to highlight them as well. F5. It's a good move. Starting to starting to hinge in or hamper black's, starting to hamper white's king mobility. I like that. I thought F5 is another fine move for my opponent. G3. I like this too. The quickest way for white to become safe at the drop of a hat without getting in the way of all sorts of kingside pieces is to play G3 and then duck into G2 with decent cover. Pawn to B3, because at some point white has to make use of these pieces on the queen side. And bishop at B2 might be nice, and so might bishop to A3. It's a hard piece for black to defend, and it's only defended once right now. The bishop has a clear shot at it, and so does the knight when the knight moves to A4. So we might be able to locate C4 as a pressure, C5 as a pressure point, and win a pawn with a lot of pressure. E4 check. Like I said, G2. I think I called it D2. Did I call it D2 before? It's G2. The king moves to G2 to escape the check. And in terms of king safety, white's doing fine. This is a safe king, yes. My opponent wants to play bishop to G7, perhaps. And I'll be honest, this is shuffling pieces. A lot of this is shuffling pieces, not in a bad way, but it is. We're looking. It's also probing for weakness, really. This is probing for weakness. I couldn't let the knight be on E5 for too long, so I gave up the minor exchange. I lost my long-range minor piece for black's knight, and I just thought this knight was going to become very powerful, either tactically on D3 or in a number of other ways. It's too influential, so I traded minor pieces here. I wasn't happy about that, except that I got the c5 pawn out of the deal as well. So, like Torch indicates here, this game is even Steven. Even Steven. So this is for this is a moment for calculation. We see that Black's options are limited. His three options here: Bishop d6, Rook d8, and Bishop g7. Each of which still leave White ahead somewhere between 3/10 of a pawn and 9/10 of a pawn. Look, these are similar moves. Rook d6 kind of looks like it's going to lead to complications, and White's not going to equalize material until a little while down the line. King to d6. Did I say Rook d6 before? Yeah, King to d6 on the other hand leaves the rook on d4 in a bad way. There's almost nowhere to go, right? You could go to d5 by rule, but then be captured, so you wouldn't really advise that. You go to d3 by rule, and the knight's gonna capture. You wouldn't advise that either. And if the rook's blocked on e4 and c4. You know, he's trapped. Rook's trapped, right? And what to do but to make it worse? D takes e4. Let's see what I should have done here. This is a good moment for Torch. b4. Simply keeping chill, letting the things that are against Black be against Black, and letting the things that are for White be for White. Countering the attack on my c5 knight with protection from a now b4 pawn. Instead, I made this blunder. Even after, yeah. So my opponent has an extra point in material. And some other intangibles. So we'll grab a pawn. Now I'm starting to cook. I'm cooking here a bit because of the pass pawn on the H file. Rook f7 would have been better. Just the way I went. My opponent can move rook to f8. Pawn to g5 cause issues with that. Different game. Okay. Let's move on. And then, oh man, you know, I'm sorry. This game was decided by a last minute blunder. I'm sorry about that. Yeah. Black played a great game right up until this very end here. The rook's en prise. So I'll capture the rook and I'm gonna win this endgame. Let me play this out against computer. Oh yeah, I think I'm gonna have to take some moments off from streaming, just for today, so to speak, or whatever. I'm not even gonna. This is all, ended with a bad blunder. All right. All right. Thank you all for watching. Thank you, Gravitrons. I'm more gravity. Have a great night. Have a great night.